Hello and welcome to this edition of Please Note, discussing immigration reform. And we're with Katie Conway, who is Policy Analyst for Office of Government Relations of the Episcopal Church, specializing in the areas of immigration and refugees. Katie, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to do this.
Thank you so much, Bishop Curry. I'm very excited to be here.
Katie, tell us a little bit about the state of play in terms of immigration reform in Congress right now. It seems like this may be an important moment.
This is an incredibly important moment. As many of you probably know, there was a big, comprehensive, bipartisan immigration bill that passed the Senate over the summer, and everyone was waiting for that momentum to continue to move to the House. Unfortunately, in the fall, there were a lot of other things happening with the shutdown and the budget, and immigration didn't end up moving the way that everyone had anticipated. Even though there were several bills introduced, nothing moved. So last week, that lack of movement changed. The House leadership introduced their standards for immigration reform, and these standards really represent a willingness to engage on this issue that we haven't seen before, and it embraces some changes in policy for them, most notably offering access to legalization for the undocumented population, as well as a version of what is known as the DREAM Act, which is citizenship for children who were brought here by their parents who lack legal status but have grown up in America. There's also enforcement measures related to workplace, and a few other provisions. But they're very broad and they are not legislation, but it's an exciting first step in this conversation and a great way to get the momentum started again.
We're going to talk about some of the principles that the Episcopal Church has formally adopted for immigration reform. But before we get to that, what are some ways that people can impact their legislators? They're either in the House or in the Senate. What are some of the effective ways that an ordinary Episcopalian who wants to encourage them, what can they do?
I think the greatest thing you can do is either call your member or send them a letter. I know it feels like you're just one call of many, but I've been in those offices. They sit there and they tally how many people called in favor of an issue or against an issue. So every call, every letter counts. And because these principles are so broadly written, the details are still being worked out. Right. So this is the time to impact that decision. If your member of Congress hears from you that you want the family immigration system to be protected, and they hear from 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, that's going to influence how they think about family immigration. So while the members are really working out what they want to do, they need to hear from their constituents that they have your support to go further than these principles and to really make some substantive changes that will improve the immigration system.
With that, and we're going to include links and information and resources that you have sent out so that people can actually follow up and actually do something that will help to make a difference. But one of the things that is unique, I think, to faith communities is a faith approach to immigration reform, and that's embodied in the principles. Tell us a little bit about these principles that the Episcopal Church stands on.
Sure. So these principles are rooted in the resolutions that get passed at General Convention, and many of these come from really walking with immigrant and refugee communities. The Episcopal Church has decades of experience working with these populations, helping them raise their voice, and so all of our resolutions come out of that work and that ministry of welcome. And so really, first and foremost, is access to citizenship. We believe that these people are part of our communities, they're part of our families, they're part of our congregations. Just as we welcome them into those communities, they need to be able to be part of America and to vote and to bring their families. So also related to that is it is the right of a U.S. citizen to bring their family, to be united with their family. And we believe that the sanctity of family, it's been the cornerstone of American immigration. It needs to remain that way. It is complementary to employment, but they shouldn't be in competition. We believe that people who are here for employment deserve to be with their families, and as well as people who are just bringing their families to be reunited. We also believe that America needs to have laws, it needs to have border enforcement, but that enforcement needs to be humane and it needs to be proportional. The sanctity of every human being can be respected within enforcement measures, and we think that We have a long way to go to make that happen, but we think it is definitely possible and should be part of any reform discussion. And finally, we have an unwavering commitment to welcoming refugees, to asylum seekers, to victims of persecution. We believe that they should have access to protection, and we should continue to welcome subsequent waves of refugees, such as folks fleeing the violence in Syria and others who are really looking to start a new life in the United States.
And those practical principles are grounded in our biblical and theological heritage from the Old Testament Hebrew scriptures, where it says, remember that you were strangers in Egypt, and you are therefore called upon to welcome the stranger. Or even in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, where it says, remember those who have welcomed strangers have sometimes welcomed angels unawares. So this is deeply part of our our faith fabric. And it's one that we share with Christians pretty much across the spectrum. I don't think I've ever seen an ecumenical and interfaith coalescence around something as significantly as I have around immigration reform. And that's something that transcends partisan politics or our respective parties. That's our deep moral convictions. Katie, I'm so grateful for the work you're doing, and we're going to include information and resources from your office as part of this edition of Please Note. But we also want folk to know that what you do is part of what we as the Episcopal Church do as part of our moral and spiritual witness in Washington, D.C.
Yes, it is, and that is why I have one of the best jobs in the country to represent the great work that you all do every day with these communities, and please always feel free to get in touch with our office. We're here to represent you and help you lift your voice up on this and any other issue.
Well, thank you so much. It was good to be with you in New York a few weeks ago, and God bless you as you go forth to address the Executive Council.
Thank you so much.
And God bless you, and keep the faith.